Parallelism and configure max degree of parallelism, MAXDOP. SQL Server normally executes queries using sequential plans on a single task. To reduce overall execution time, SQL Server can decide to distribute queries over several tasks so that it can execute the tasks in parallel. Parallelism refers to multiple processors cooperating to execute a single query at the same time. Parallel execution plans. Parallel execution involves the overhead of synchronizing the tasks and monitoring the tasks. Because of this overhead, SQL Server only considers parallel plans for expensive queries, where the advantages outweigh the additional overhead. The query optimizer decides whether a parallel plan should be used, based on two aspects of the query, and of the system configuration. A value called the maximum degree of parallelism, MAXDOP, determines a limit for how many CPUs can be used to execute a query. Another value called the cost threshold for parallelism determines the cost that a query must meet before a parallel query plan will even be considered. If a query is expensive enough to consider a parallel plan, SQL Server still might decide to use a sequential plan that is lower in overall cost. Controlling parallelism. The query optimizer only creates a parallel plan but is not involved in deciding the MAXDOP value. The MAXDOP value can be configured at the server level and can also be overridden at the query level via a query hint. Even if the query optimizer creates a parallel query plan, the execution engine might decide to only use a single CPU, based on the resources available when it is time to execute the query. Configure max degree of parallelism, MAXDOP. When an instance of SQL Server runs on a computer that has more than one microprocessor or CPU, it detects the degree of parallelism, that is, the number of processors employed to run a single statement, for each parallel plan execution. But you can use the max degree of parallelism option to limit the number of processors to use in parallel plan execution. Configure the max degree of parallelism option using SQL Server Management Studio. In Object Explorer, right-click a server and select Properties. Then click the Advanced node. In the max degree of parallelism box, select the maximum number of processors to use in parallel plan execution. However, you can override the max degree of parallelism value in queries by specifying the MAXDOP query hint in the query statement.